10th Amendment says, whatever is specifically not in the Constitution is left for the states and the people to handle. So, to give an example, for instance, if you get married, right, if Miss Potter wanted to marry the Unabomber, right, what type of certificate is she given? A marriage certificate from where? From a state, right? That's because what words are not in the Constitution? Marriage, right? Which is why in the gay marriage discussion, states become really important because marriage has always been a state issue, right? What about when you get your driver's license? Who issues your driver's license? The state does, because automobiles are not mentioned in the Constitution. That's what we're talking about. Same thing with education, right? Schools are mentioned in the Constitution, so it's a state issue. Every state has a different educational system. So that's the 10th Amendment, and Jefferson's going to use that because, and we'll get to it soon, but there's going to be two ways of the Constitution. This is a really important part. There's called a loose interpretation. A Hamiltonian interpretation is loose. He uses the elastic clause. Congress and the federal government can kind of do whatever they want to do because the elastic clause. That's a loose interpretation. Jeffersonians use a tight or a restricted interpretation that says, no, the federal government can't do anything unless it's specifically in the Constitution. Other than that, the states do it because of the 10th Amendment. So you've got two different ways to interpret the Constitution between these huge groups. Okay. The Judiciary Act actually organized the Supreme Court. So the Judiciary Act of 1789 organizes the Supreme Court. The first Chief Justice is a guy named John Jay. John Jay, if you'll remember, was on the committee to write the Declaration of Independence. And he'll be the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. He will not be the most famous, but he'll definitely be the first. Okay. Now, the next thing is gigantor important. Hamilton is going to submit this plan to Washington. He has two plans. The report on public credit and the report on manufacturers. The report on public credit...
He's just really working on the fire alarm in just a minute. If it does go off, just disregard it. Thank you.
That's actually bad because we have a fire alarm in the classroom. A little bit loud. It's ridiculous. It wakes up the dead. Yeah, it's right next to Sweeney and Nathan are not going to really have a... Right. Luckily, I have small ears, so it's kind of a burden. The report on public credit. How is it that America is going to get... Right, we have all this debt we have, and we need to get more... We need more money. But no one's going to want to loan us money if we owe everybody money, right? So if Rahel over there owes everybody money, and then she asks O'Banion for money, what are you likely to say? Right. Whatever the term "go screw yourself" is in French or in Swiss German. It's not Sweden. Wow. All right, it's an S word. They're European. Everyone's white over there. There's lots of cold. Right? It's all the same thing. So what he said in his report on public credit is we have to favor the wealthy. Hamilton wanted to favor the wealthy. Because by favoring the wealthy, they will be on board with our new government. He argued the wealthy have to have faith in our government to lend us money and to be important leaders in the government. Hamiltonian Federalists openly favored the wealthy. It didn't hurt that most of them had a little bit of money. Ironically, though, Hamilton did not start off with money. And Jefferson did. Jefferson was born to a wealthy family, but didn't favor the wealthy. Hamilton was born to a mom who was a prostitute in the Caribbean and moved up to New York and worked his way up, became a general, and then ended up doing this. He's brilliant. So the report on public credit favor the wealthier groups. In return, they will lend money and offer support to the government, and it will be stronger. And the second report was his report on manufacturing. Remind me, what did Jefferson want? He wanted everyone to be a what?
A farmer.
A farmer, right? Agriculture. Hamilton said we need to put our focus on manufacturing. We need to focus on making stuff, not on farming. So can you see here, he's a loose construction, elastic clause guy who wants to favor the wealthy and not favor farming. This is making Jefferson's ginger hair turn gray. And they were openly hostile to each other in terms of their ideas. I don't know how much they didn't like feud openly and physically or anything like that. Do what? Well, I actually, Jefferson's vice president will duel and kill, but that wasn't because of Jefferson. And the guy that killed Hamilton was a douche, so it wasn't Jefferson, it was that guy. Aaron Burr sucked. In your notes, the following things Aaron Burr was a douchebag. All right. So Hamilton's going to try to sell this plan to Washington. What are we going to do? And he has his five components on his five main components, his five ideas, his financial plan, and he sells Washington on this, and Washington sides with Hamilton. And when Washington does this, he essentially becomes more of a Federalist. Before this, Washington was kind of like this guy who was not a party guy, right? He wasn't a Federalist, he wasn't an anti-Federalist, he wasn't a Jeffersonian, he was just Washington. But once he starts siding with Hamilton, he sort of becomes politically partisan, okay? Here are the five parts of the of Hamilton's financial plan. The first one is funding the debt at par. Do you know what par means? Even value. What was happening was our government, like during the war, was selling bonds. You know what a bond is?
Yeah.
It's debt. So let's say I give Bailey a bond, and it says I owe you, right? Okay, you give me $100. Here's your bond, and I'm going to give you $100 back plus some interest, right? So essentially, what happens is she gets the money I need now, and I'm going to pay her back later. Does that make sense? Now to fund at par, if I owe her $105, if I fund her at par, how much do I pay her back?
$105.
$105. Well, what our government was thinking about doing was only paying her back 10 or 15%. But if I pay you back only 10 or 15%, are you likely to get more debt in the future? Are people going to give you any money?
No.
Yeah, if I'm only giving you back 10% of what you gave me, no one's going to give me any more money, right? He said we have to fund this at par. We have to do this.
So it's paying debts back.
It's paying the debts back at full value. And we didn't have a lot of money for this, but Hamilton said we had to. One thing that started happening, though, is that wealthy people started going and finding these average poor people who had these bonds, and they'll say, hey, we'll give you 25% of this. They're like, all right, well, I didn't have anything for it. They'll get the 25%, and the government gave the rich people the full amount back. So a lot of people got very, very wealthy doing this. And that was okay with Hamilton because Hamilton openly favored the wealthy. The second part is the assumption of state debts. All right, a lot of states owed a bunch of money too. Now I'm a really good artist. All right, so states owed money. Here, by the way, I'll erase this for people at home. Here's our America. All right, that's America. Okay, and we had a couple of states, a couple colonies, colony, and then big southern and western colonies, right? Now, if you're that's pretty much the scale, all right? That's really how it looked. If you are a small state and you owe a bunch of money, you're pretty mad because you're a small state and you've spent most of your money getting the freedom for all these other states, right? Southern states were more loyalist than patriot, right? Well, when big states would owe money, what they would do is they would just sell off some land, and they would be fine. We'll sell off some land, and we're good. But what could northern states not do? Sell off land. Why not? They ain't got no land, right? There is that much land. So not only can they not sell off land, but they were the ones paying for most of the war and winning the freedom. So Hamilton said, the states, the federal government should be the ones to take on the debt of the states. The state shouldn't pay their debts back, the federal government should. Well, who's happy with that? The North is really happy. Who's pissed? The South. So Hamilton and Jefferson actually make a deal on this. Because Jefferson did not like this idea. Jefferson hated debt. And he just said, well, you know, we can sell off our land and be fine. Here's what happened. Here's how Hamilton convinced him to do this. Remind me, by the way, where our United States capital is today.
Washington.
Washington, D.C. All right. Is that a northern city or a southern city? Well, back then it was part of Virginia. They took an area and made it part of Virginia, made it called the District of Columbia. The reason why we have a capital where it is, close to Virginia and Maryland, is because of Hamilton wanting to fund debts, fund state debts, and Jefferson not wanting to. So Jefferson essentially got a capital pretty close to his house. The capital became basically part of Virginia, right next to Virginia. That's because he got that, so Hamilton could get assumption of state debts. Does that make sense? That's how we have it today. Oh, log rolling. All right. Then we get a tariff. What's a tariff?
Tax on importation.
Tax on imported goods. This is a small. This is not a revenue tariff. Or sorry, this is not a. A protective tariff, right? We're not protecting American goods. We're just raising a little bit of money for the government. Our government did not bring in much money, and the tariff was a way to bring in money to fund the federal government. Right? We didn't have income tax. We didn't have a federal income tax until the 1900s. We did a little bit during the Civil War, but for the most part, we didn't have federal income tax. The federal government used tariffs as a way to fund this. It was 8% essentially. So this is 1. This is 2. Tariffs are 3. Thirdly, by the way, don't all of these things are making the federal government stronger, right? Bringing in money for the federal government, assuming state debts. Also think of it this way. If you're a state and the federal government has just taken on your debt, do you feel more or less part of the American government now? Aren't you feeling more attached to the federal government because they're taking on some of your debt? And the rich, because they're poor on public credit, now feel part of the country. So Hamilton's trying to get buy-in from everybody. With the excise taxes, an excise tax is they're taxing specific goods. Not goods on everything, but they're taxing the sale of specific goods. In fact, in America today, we call them sometimes sin taxes. We have extra taxes on things like alcohol and tobacco, gas, all have excise taxes.
What's the revenue at?
That was what set up the tariff. Yeah, the Revenue Act set up the tariff. Our government started putting heavy excise taxes on whiskey. You guys read about the Whiskey Rebellion in Zen, right? What were people using whiskey for in Western Pennsylvania?
But they use
Well, yes, still is, emotionally anyway. It was used as currency. Whiskey was used as currency. In far western Pennsylvania, there was not a ton of currency in a year, but there was a ton of whiskey. And people used whiskey as their currency. So if Walker wanted to go buy something, you'd buy it in whiskey. What a great society. And lastly, and most importantly, and by far most controversially, a national bank. This is what Jefferson really hated. And this is what Jeffersonians really hate. And this, in fact, is what starts off our loose versus strict interpretation or construction of the Constitution, which I talked about. All right, here's how the National Bank worked. I'm a really good artist. All right, here is a bank. They call it the Bank United States, right? What's that sound like? Bank United States, what could be our acronym? The BUS. All right, the Bank United States is the BUS. And there's not just one giant Bank United States, right? Every bank has branches, right? So there's branches all over the place. So you have branches all over the place in different cities and states. It's a federal institution. So what happens is the government puts its money in there. So government money goes in there and private money goes in there. So if you're somebody that has cash, you can put it in a national bank. The government puts its revenue in a national bank. Now listen really closely to this. How do banks make money?
interest
On what?
on
On loans. Banks make money by loaning money out to people and then collecting money plus interest. Does that make sense? If you are somebody who wants to keep your money safe, sometimes banks are a bad place because they weren't very safe because they would fail easily. What type of banks are the least likely to fail?
Foreign.
Government banks.
Banks that have lots of what?